It's a delight to be back with you for another edition of the podcast, special 25th anniversary edition. And it's great to have as our guests today graduates from way back when, a blast from the past from 2007, Micah and Amy Lindsay. Micah and Amy, you guys look like exactly the same. Good job on that, and welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Great. Well, so glad you could join us. And you know, one of the reasons why we wanted to have you is not just you know, of your sterling legacy, you know, that you left during your time at Adfantis, but also because, of course, you guys met at Adfantis and got married, you know, after graduation, and we'll get to that because I'm sure inquiring fans definitely want to know. But we'll talk about your experience at AFA and get your reflections. And let's begin. Amy, you came to Adfantis as a 7th grader. What was the adjustment like for you? What was your background? Where did you come from? And yeah, how did that go for you starting off?
Sure. It was definitely challenging. I think, like for most students who come to Adfantis, there's always an adjustment period. Even though I came from a classical school, my mom helped start Dominion Christian, but at the time they only went through 6th grade. And so then Adfantis at the time only started at 7th and went through 12th grade, if you remember. So, so I made that transition, but even just that transition from a different classical school was challenging. And I would say 7th grade is a tricky year anyways, especially for girls emotionally. So I think I've told parents this as a now teacher myself, that 7th grade, I just cried, I think, almost every single day. And I got through it, but I think I did cry almost every single day when I got home before starting homework. So so it was hard. It was a challenge.
Well, yeah, if I recall, I didn't see many tears from you. I think, you know, you held it together well. I think, but like you say, maybe getting home, parents see a different thing than the teachers do. Absolutely. Micah, you came, I believe, as a freshman, correct?
Correct, freshman year.
Yeah, so what was that like for you?
So I was homeschooled up until freshman year. So I think coming into a school as rigorous as Adfantis was definitely challenging. So I can relate to Amy and kind of the challenges of starting off at AFA as a freshman.
Did you cry every night too?
I didn't cry every night.
Some nights.
I don't know if there was no tears, but probably less tears. It was challenging, but I think I had a lot of help from my teachers that first year, and a lot of I think time aside for tutoring and for getting assignments done, things that were new to me that I hadn't necessarily done as much of homeschooling. I think that they worked well with me, so I can relate to it definitely being a challenge the first probably couple months of starting at Adfantis, but one that, you know, once I started getting going and the teachers kind of knew where I was at and kind of knew how to ask for help, I think it kind of improved after the first couple months. So yeah,
you know, Micah, if I recall right, you stepped into a class. You were part of a class that was pretty high achieving, pretty, you know, high motor, so to speak. Coming from a homeschool background, was that weird? Was it kind of like stepping into, like, you know, a whitewater rapid, so to speak?
It was a little bit like getting on a whitewater rapid kind of raft, but I don't know. I don't know if I realized how smart they were until later, so that might have been a good thing. But I definitely did have some very smart classmates, and that was definitely a little intimidating coming from homeschool, where you don't have those peers to compare yourself to. And then, you know, all of a sudden you have peers, but not only peers that are average, but peers who are, you know, at Adfantis and academically minded, and it was a little challenging, I would say.
Yeah. So now you guys both graduated from AFA, and you know, I'm sure you guys have great things to say about it, obviously. But what would you say was one of the hardest things about being a student at AFA? You know, it could be what was going on at school, or maybe, go home and, and you tell kids you go to this weirdly named little school. What was, Amy, let's start with you. What was the hardest thing for you about your time at AFA?
I think the hardest thing for me was more of a personal issue. I struggled a lot with perfectionism. I don't know if you remember that, having taught me. But I struggled a lot with wanting to keep up such high standards. And because you have great faculty, great leadership, they hold you to such a high standard. And wanting to meet that regularly, that was challenging for me personally, working through the spiritual aspect of wanting perfectionism, yet knowing that you cannot be perfect. The
Right.
theology meeting the meeting of the material world, if you will.
Right. Yeah.
And that, I think, was great for me to have to work that out before ever going to college and working through that struggle.
Yeah, that's interesting because, of course, not every student is necessarily aware of that struggle. And we have other students like, at the time they're going through it. But of course, teachers see it. And I remember, Amy, sometimes grading your papers. And I remember this one particular paper because I remember talking, I think this might have been 8th grade, 8th or 9th grade. I think it was, well, I'm not sure, but I remember talking with Kurt Wellington, who was there, the science
Right.
teacher. I was like,
Right.
no, I think I'm going to have to give Amy like a B+ on this. But like, I don't want to because I know that I mean like an additional conversation. If I bumped it up like to an A+, she probably would move on and be okay. But like, it's kind of a B+. So yeah, it's teachers too go through that kind of go through that with students in some level. Micah, that wasn't your struggle.
I was going to say perfectionism, but since she already took it, I guess I'll go with something else. That was definitely not me as a student, especially an early student at Advantes. I think probably the struggle for me, especially the first year or two, was getting used to having deadlines and having to take exams under a certain amount of time, writing under a time limit, having assignments due the next day and preparing for things the next week. As a homeschool student, depending on how your homeschooling is set up, you don't necessarily have as many deadlines as you do going to a high school and a high school like Advantes. So I think learning that, you can't just do this when you want to do it, but you have to do it because it's due tomorrow, second period, and you got to, wake up before school and get it done, or stay up late to get it done. And also you got to think about the test next week also. And I think that was something new for me that I had to get used to about being a Advantes student. So. Yes, I think that experience, Micah, is, I think, fairly common for a lot of people coming from a homeschool background. This adjustment to having, get up early, routine. It can be, waking up at whatever, 6 o'clock or something like that. I have to, it's, how long did you think it take you for that routine or that sense of routine to settle in? Probably by like the holiday season, probably started to get more used to being in kind of a routine of, I get up every morning at 6 or whatever it was. It seemed pretty early because like a lot of students, I had at least a half an hour drive into school, and getting used to getting up early and having homework every day and, go home, start your homework, take a short nap, whatever it was. I think probably by the holiday season, I started to kind of, my first year, get into that routine of, this is, what normal life is, and kind of start to do well in it. So good. Well, good for you. And I remember, this initial struggle for you, Micah, but I remember too, you starting to learn how to swim, and suddenly you're right there with that stream of the other classmates. And that was great to see. So you guys spent either 4 or 6 years there. What stands out for you in terms of your most memorable sorts of either moments or overall impressions from your time at AFA? Amy, why don't we start with you?
I don't know if I have one. Well,
sure.
Actually, I have probably one more general. and then one very specific,
Go ahead. Yeah.
which is from your class.
Yeah.
So the general experience I remember, and the biggest takeaway and why I ended up coming back into education myself, was because of this discipleship model that I feel that the classical school, particularly at Fontes with its faculty at the time, lent itself to. It wasn't, by the time that we graduated, I don't think it was just teacher-student, but it felt like lifelong mentors, people who cared for you, who shared their lives with you. And it wasn't just at the end of the school day, we're out of here, cut off, go home. But I remember maybe it's because of my perfectionism, again, having conversations with teachers at the end of the school day, struggling through these topics, because by the end, I would like to think I didn't just care about the grade. I really did want to explore the topic, know about it, struggle with it a little bit more. And I think that was profoundly impactful on me. And then the more specific memory is one that we usually cannot talk about as a couple.
Oh, yes. I was hoping this would come up because I think I know what you're going to say. And actually, I say this every year to every senior class. Okay, go ahead. You share it. Go ahead.
So the other memory is your history games are very well known. And in the Peloponnesian War game, we had a little bit of an issue where I may or may not have cheated.
Who can say, right?
Yeah.
I was told there were no rules, and for a rule follower, that's very hard. When there's no rules,
Right.
there's all concept,
right.
boundaries, and honor. So there was a little bit of an issue with Rebecca, Shanette, and I at the time. Kind of the way that we played the game was not really within the spirit of the game, and so we won, only to have it all unravel at the end, and somebody else's team did not win.
Right.
And it got ugly.
Right. So a little bit of context, ladies and gentlemen. So it's government class. We do this unit on the Peloponnesian War. We play this Peloponnesian War game, which is it's kind of like Risk and kind of not, and it goes over a period of weeks. And Amy and Rebecca and some others were on the Spartan team. I think. Yes. Micah, you were on the Athenian team.
I was on the Athenian team. Yeah.
And the two kind of powerhouses of the game. And there was some cutting outside the lines on the team. And I remember, like, the Athenian team, Micah, like, you guys got all, but maybe this is just, rose-colored glasses looking back on it. I think, Micah, I remember you, a couple of your members of your team getting particularly angry. And I think you were trying to say, like, oh, wait, it's okay. And I don't know, like, well, it's all right. And I don't know if that had to do with your personality or a certain fondness you might have had for someone on the Spartan team.
No.
It might have been a combination of the two. I don't know.
Yes. So, Amy, here's a question. You mentioned the Peloponnesian War game. And so I do think that one of the things that the AFA experience, I try and do this in history classes. I know maybe some other teachers, I think Mr. Carey tries to do this in some of his math classes. And there are other examples. But we, on purpose, I think, try and put you in situations where you probably will feel uncomfortable. I guess, like, for someone like yourself who wants especially maybe earlier on in your high school career, who wanted kind of everything in a certain way, what was that experience like for you? And, how was that adjustment for you? Yeah, let's just say that. Go ahead.
I did not like it. It was very uncomfortable a lot of the time. It was good, though, I will say, at the end of the day. I did struggle a lot with it because for me, I'm the sort of person who, if you give me the list, I can check off the boxes and achieve what you tell me to do. And I think that was good, even though it was hard. I think that was an initial adjustment as well, especially coming into the high school realm of Advantes more so than the middle school, but especially high school, where the teachers did make you intentionally uncomfortable, and that struggle was hard. But impactful too.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, we're hearing, who is that? Is that Eli or Will?
That is Eli.
Oh, great. Yeah, we're hearing one of the Lindsay kids in the background, and you're free to go get them. And yeah,
I'll be right back. Micah can take over.
Micah will take over. Excellent. So Micah, how about you? What are your, shall we say, most memorable takeaways from your time at AFA?
So probably one of the most memorable things that I took away was just the community that I was a part of at Infantes. I think being around, as we talked about earlier, my class was very bright. A lot of my classmates, and just being around that environment of academically minded people who were asking important questions and bigger questions than I would normally ask, and just the desire for truth and kind of the biblical teaching that we got was something that was new and different to me. And I think being in that culture of those kind of like-minded people, or I don't even know if I was like-minded at the time, but kind of brought me along into that mindset, was one of the most memorable things, and the faculty included with my peers, one of the most memorable things from Advantes. I think that, along with my time doing athletics there. So I had a great experience doing basketball and soccer there in high school, and one, I'd say maybe failed season of baseball. It wasn't my best sport. It was something new that I tried, but I enjoyed it and I had a good time, and it was a great team to be on. But personally, not a great shining moment, but it was a humbling one.
Yeah. Okay. So, Mike, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
That's all right.
No, so my most memorable Micah moments actually were basketball moments, Micah. Now, I don't know if you remember this, but do you remember? Okay, so no one else will remember this, but why do I? But you remember we were playing Trinity, and in that place, in that big court in Alexandria, and I put you guarding on the low post, this guy that was like twice your size.
Oh, yeah, like the 7-foot guy. I remember him, yeah.
Yeah. And do you remember the charge you took against that guy? Oh, my goodness. That was, now maybe I remember that particular moment because we ended up losing the game. That was a highlight. And then later, ladies and gentlemen, Micah actually joined me as an assistant coach. We coached the girls team, an AFA girls basketball team. Sadly, that girls basketball team we don't have one anymore, but hopefully we'll get one back. But Micah, do you remember when we constructed that defense for the second half of this one game? Oh my goodness. Now here's my question, Micah. Now I remember these things with incredible clarity, with too much clarity, really. You think that a middle-aged man would have other things on his mind. Do you remember that, though, that designing the defense and in that particular game against Fairfax Christian?
I remember some of the court pressing we did. I don't know about the specific game, though, that defense.
See, this just goes to show that I'm a little bit crazy, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry. But Micah was a great assistant coach. It was fun to work with you. But then, okay, so you guys moved on after graduation, and Amy, you said you stayed involved in education. So tell us about what happened to you guys post-graduation, educationally and career-wise for you.
Sure. So post-Advantes graduation, I went on to attend George Mason and studied literature with a Latin minor under Bill Carey Sr., who was over there at the time teaching, which was very fun. So went on to do that, and then came back and even helped do some subbing at the classical schools in the area. Actually, my senior year, taught back at Infantes.
Right. I was
taught some Latin.
Yeah.
My senior year of college, and went on to teach up in Northern Virginia, 3rd grade and 6th grade. And then we moved down to Charlottesville, Virginia
Mm-hmm.
for a few years. And that's where I worked, taught third grade, and then moved into administration at a small classical Christian school there, which I loved.
Yeah.
So,
So what was it like, Amy, going from like student to teacher? And again, you were here for a year at AFA as you were working through your degree. Tell me about that experience.
coming back and teaching at Adfantes?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I loved every minute of it. But again, I'm probably one of the weird people that just couldn't stay away. I love the culture of the classroom, especially a classical classroom, where there's a bond between teacher and student that I don't know that I've ever heard other students experiencing. As I've gone into graduate school and undergrad, when I would talk about my class and talk about my educational experience, people looked at me like I had two heads, oftentimes, partially because of the types of things that we talked about, it even in high school, partially because of the relationships that we had. And I loved coming back into that. It was kind of funny being at Adfantes that one year as I was finishing up my education, because my sister was also there. So that was kind of fun and challenging in its own way, as I'm sure you've understood now, teaching your own children, similar challenges. So
Sure. No, that makes total sense. And Micah, you decided to pursue pre-med, and actually you're currently in your residency. Is that correct?
Correct.
Well, congrats on that. I know that's
Thank you.
an incredible achievement. But yeah, so what led you into your interest in the medical field? And yeah, go ahead and tell us what happened for you after graduating from AFA.
Okay. So I graduated AFA. I went to George Mason for 2 years with Amy. So we were there together for the first 2 years. I was studying biology and then chemistry, and then I think back to biology. But decided what I really wanted to do was biochemistry. So I went ahead and transferred after 2 years to Virginia Tech and finished my degree down in Blacksburg after 2 years. And then after that, I knew I wanted to go into medicine at that point. But just graduating college, had been engaged senior year, married right after graduation, was not the time to go straight into medical school. So I took a job for a couple of years back in Northern Virginia as a chemist for a small company up in Herndon. I did that for a couple of years, and I really enjoyed that job, but knew that that medicine was what I really wanted to do, and that really was my passion at the time. So we moved down to Charlottesville so that Amy could do her graduate work. And during that time, I got some healthcare experience and then applied to medical school and ended up doing medical school at Liberty University. So I was in their second class there for their medical school. So I got to be kind of part of a new program at a new building, and it was, fun to be part of that. And then after graduation from Liberty, came down to Ocala, Florida, where we are currently. And I'm part of the family medicine residency here as a second year resident, hoping to finish up here in about a year and a half. So
well, great. Good for you.
Yeah.
Excellent. So Amy, I think anybody that knew you as a student probably felt that you were destined to be a teacher.
yes, probably.
Micah, when did this passion for medicine start for you?
So for me, I think growing up, I always had an interest in nature, being outside, figuring out how things work, taking a closer look at, plants and leaves and weather, whatever it was, something that was kind of a natural process, natural sciences. I enjoyed, things that were mechanical, but it probably wasn't until I had a few medical experiences of my own, and then my mother ended up having an illness, a cancer, when I was in 8th grade, and I ended up spending a lot of time with her as her caretaker since I was currently homeschooled and didn't have a job at the time that summer. And I think being around the nurses up there, the wonderful nurses that she had, the wonderful physicians, and going to appointments with her and chemotherapy rounds and asking questions and seeing how well they took care of my mom and other people really, I think, kind of lit the passion and desire to want to do medicine and do the same for other people if I could. So I think that's really what the kickoff was. So.
Right. And of course, I remember your mom's illness, and it's wonderful you had a chance to rally around her like that and be a part of her life. And it's great that you've taken that into your adulthood. And of course, it's great. We should mention that your mom has been in remission now for some time.
Yeah.
Correct?
So she's been doing very well, complete remission since that time, and had no further complications. So she's doing very well. So.
Well, that's wonderful news. Absolutely. Fantastic. So what was it like? So what were you guys, so you guys end up getting married after graduation, it's not a story, it doesn't happen all the time, but you guys aren't the only ones.
Right.
So my question is, what was your first impression of each other?
This is almost as dangerous as the Peloponnesian War game question.
I have to confess, that's kind of why I asked the question.
Well, I knew the Lindsay boy family,
Right.
Because of course Micah's older brother had already been at the school where I was in middle school.
Right.
But he had just graduated, so he was older. So I had known Jared, did not like Jared. So I already walked into it not liking Micah, just purely by reputation. So hopefully I've grown in not being quite as judgmental as I was, but it was high school.
That's what it was. Yeah.
Right.
And of course, the kind of irony there is Jared, is also working at the same classical school that you were affiliated with.
Right.
So,
Right.
Everything's come full circle. So.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Micah, how about you? What were your impressions of Amy?
So
Right off the bat.
So I went in as a freshman, and we were part of a fairly large class for our fund. I think it was like 20 people almost.
2021 that year.
It was a little bit of a larger class, and Amy was a different student than I was when I first went into Fontes. So I don't think I interacted a whole lot with her at first. She was, very much getting stuff done and work done, and academically focused, and I was not as quite. So I don't know.
Punching other guys in the shoulder, stuff like that.
Yeah. So I don't think. It was a little while, but before we had a lot of interaction. But we talked a little bit in class and at lunch. But other than that, I don't remember.
Worldview, I think, was actually when we actually had interactions where I felt like, oh, he's not terrible. So,
I'll take that. So.
Yeah.
I that's what I remember was that first worldview that we went to. I think it might have been in October of that school year or something.
Yeah.
And so that's when I first remembered, or got to know you a little bit. So.
Yeah, and then we started, I think probably from that point, become friends and, hanging out with, like we did with most of our other classmates, and, developed a friendship from there, so.
Yeah, and you guys were you guys dating in high school, or you guys was it mostly college, or what was that like?
So I don't think we really were more dating till the end of high school.
Right.
So probably not until senior year. I think junior year we both knew that we were interested in each other, and good friends at the time, but didn't really start dating until more of probably senior year, and definitely more so in college.
Right. Yeah.
But we tried to keep it kind of on the down low a little bit in that fun days. Our senior year, just we had a lot of other stuff to focus on as far as college and finishing up high school and church life, and so we tried to keep it a little bit on the low. So.
You guys did a good job. Of course, I'm a guy. Of course, I'm kind of obtuse about these things. But I thought I didn't notice anything until maybe like March or April, maybe of the year.
Right.
So,
I think that's when it kind of snuck out among the teachers, partially because of his dad when they went on the Israel trip.
Oh.
His dad started forwarding emails to my father.
Oh.
Which Mrs. Moore at the time then noticed. And
Oh.
said, what is this?
Right. So yes, of course, that sort of thing is like all of the buzz in the faculty meeting room, right? We're like, oh, interesting. Um, well, yeah, that's great. And so now you guys, right? You got married. Yeah, we heard one of your sons in the background. Actually, you have two boys, Eli
Yes.
and Will, and are apparently, as you mentioned, expecting a third. So congratulations on that. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Now, like, right, as things seem to come full circle, life moves on. Now you guys are parents. What do you take with you from your AFA experience at this stage of your lives?
I think for me, because I was teaching, I was an academic dean at Regents in Charlottesville for a while. And then when we moved here, have stayed home. And so now being at home with little ones where life is not the way that it used to look, working and being in an academic setting, it's very different, as any parent of young children can tell you.
Eli, do you want to discuss philosophy or Shakespeare? Or,
he does ask some hard questions, surprisingly, for a 4-year-old.
Right.
Which, yes, so he does, every once in a while they do come up with some questions, and like, why did Israel worship a golden cow? Why was it a cow and not some other creature? That's
I don't know.
I've never asked that question in my life.
Yeah, I know, right. Yeah.
But it's fun. So I think the thing that I take away is still the discipleship model. So having come up in that, and really firmly believing that that's what makes a difference in a person's life, and having that impact my own life, and then trying to share that with my students and now my children, that life is to be shared, it's to be lived together. It's not clean cut the way that perfectionists like myself like it to be. And so I'm grateful that I had that model and that experience even as young as 17 years old, and knowing that impact, because now being in my 30s, raising babies, I see that and how important it is that we have a household that's a Christian culture, and not just me telling them the rules and making them obey. And because we know that that's not the way that you create a heart that wants to love and to worship the Lord, but instead hopefully winning over their affections through discipleship, through loving the right things, right? That's hopefully what we're doing. And it's messy and it's hard, especially in a time where you've had to be locked at home for multiple months. That's kind of a new model of parenting.
Right.
But I think that discipleship model now with my own children has been profoundly impactful.
Well, yeah, that's great. I think with that sort of model of parenting and that sort of model of education, it's kind of like the long con.
Right. Yes.
It can sometimes be hard to have the patience and the trust that it will bear fruit, because you don't always see it right away, right? Yeah.
No.
Those are some, great thoughts, Amy. Thank you. Micah, what about you? What do you take now, at this stage of your life, from your AFA experience?
I think, kind of what Amy was saying as far as the culture we will, experience at Fontes, and trying to instill that in our family, the Christian culture and the culture of seeking truth, of always learning, not being afraid of questions that you don't have an answer to, really thinking through things, reevaluating things, going through that process with our kids, even when they're young. And I think the other thing too is how much I hope that our kids can find a place similar to Fontes, where they have the kind of experience that we had with our education and being a part of that kind of culture, that we can, find a a school culture for them at some point, where they can, experience that as well, and their learning and their personal development. So
And let me ask you, have you found that to be the case with your own children now, since you taught for quite a long time?
Right.
And now your children come up through it.
Yes. So, well, like you say, I think, Amy, what you said, and Micah, you too, I think it resonates with me. And it's interesting, like, to have the rubber meet the road when you can do it with students who you just, yes, you do have a relationship with them, but they're not your kids, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And it's different. And then you do it with your own kids, and then I could say that sometimes there's a little bit more sweat involved. Like, right, and some more temptation to kind of jump in and, like you say, like, put a rule in. Now, of course, sometimes, you need boundaries.
Sometimes you have to, right.
Sure, right. But to try, to kind of come back to the long con and to kind of to trust, like you say, like the culture of your home, of your church, of your school, win out in the end, and to believe that that is the case. And maybe if you're not in that kind of environment where that you don't think that can happen, maybe you should switch your environment. But I will say, right, as a parent, that it's a different kind of level of trust. So I have a 20, an 18, and a 15. And to try and, it is a little bit more, it's a little more difficult because oftentimes, right, you having been through it, and you guys have been through it,
right.
Oh, that's like, what are you doing? Like, come on, like, you know what you're doing. I mean, like, you should know, but then, you step back and say, no, wait, like, trust the process, realize that, that in many ways, like, all my kids, like, are way ahead of me from where I was at their age, right? So, you're right, Amy. It's a different sort of thing, but I do keep coming back to that. And I'm glad to be surrounded by, colleagues and the educational model that we still use at AFA. So, right, as parents of young kids, and of course, they'll be going to school, in a couple years or so. It can be a little weird because you've been there and done that and know so much of your experience. To let them experience that themselves can be a little nerve-wracking, but I know I do best when I kind of like pull back and just like, okay, let's see how this plays out. And then it might take a week or 2 or 3 or 6 or 7, but the boomerang sort of comes. It comes back around sometimes, even when you don't think it will. So many blessings to you guys and good luck to you as your kids' schooling will begin, here shortly. And it's interesting to see if it's hard to kind of to step back.
Do you think it's going to be hard for me to step back?
Maybe. And I'm sure you'll do a fantastic job, though, guys. I'm sure you will do a wonderful job with your kids and just as you have in your lives. It's really exciting to see where you guys are at, and congratulations again on your children and your careers, your residency, Micah.
Thank you.
Amy, I know you've got your hands full wrestling those boys of yours, but that's great. If you talk about coming back in the Northern Virginia area, there's a school for your kids. Second generation of AFA. So, ladies and gentlemen, Micah and Amy Lindsay, thanks so much, guys, for your time with us tonight.
Of course.
Thank you very much for having us. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, and Micah, Eli, and Will, and possibly baby number 3, they ever need to take a charge, they've got the right dad. Yep, and strong, just, it won't hurt that much, right? All right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this episode. Be sure to check us out for future episodes of our 25th anniversary edition series. Mike and Amy, thanks so much again. And blessings to you. We'll hope to see you around.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, goodbye and good night.